Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome production designer Emer O'Sullivan, who joins us to talk about their work on Half Man. Emer will talk us through the creative decisions made for the various looks in the different episodes. Please be warned there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Emer. Hi Emer, thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Robert. Thanks for having me.
We're here to talk about Half Man, which is currently on BBC here in the UK, and I guess around the world it's on HBO. Before we jump in with the nitty-gritty of the making of the show, how have you found the reception to the show?
Good. I mean, I've never experienced anything like it. The buzz on it is wild. Like, it's just all over the media, all over social media. I've never been on a project that's been quite like it. And we had a screening a couple of weeks ago, and I was getting more and more nervous towards it because the expectation was so high. I can't even imagine how Richard must feel about it. And but then we watched 2 episodes back to back. And I was like, right, okay, it's good. That's what we set out to do. But yeah, it was pretty nerve-wracking. But I mean, it's so exciting. Like, yeah, it's very, very exciting.
Because when you're in the sort of midst of making a program, you don't necessarily know how it's going to turn out sometimes. So I guess when you sit down and then you watch it, you're like, okay, like now I kind of understand what they were going for at times. But then also it's, yeah, like the pressure, like because there's the follow-up to Baby Reindeer, then there's this. There must have been so much more pressure for everybody. But then also you're having fun, you're doing your work, and you're working over different time periods and different stories, different parts of people's lives. So I think there's probably so much that you can work with. And from a design point of view as well, like it must have been so much fun, and knowing that you can work in different time periods, especially with like each episode focusing on that stuff. But before we jump into that stuff as a sort of thing, how did the project come about and what made you want to take it on?
I guess I'd got to a stage with my career that I kind of was looking for something really to challenge me and a bit different, and yeah, just to bring me to somewhere else. And I got the treatment for this, and hadn't read anything like it. I mean, I talked about, like, I was going into town with my husband, and we were driving in the car, and it's a really long hill, downhill. He was driving, and I was in the passenger seat. He's like, what is wrong with you? I was like, what do you mean? He was like, you are so tense. I was like, oh my God, I've just read this thing. And it was really, I can't even remember if it was like the treatment or the script. I think it might have just been even the treatment at that point. But yeah, I had never read anything like it. And so I wanted to meet for it. And it was quite a process, actually. It was a bit back and forward. I think maybe I got a script, and then I'd put together my response, my mood boards for it, then met a lot of Zoom, since COVID, it's all Zoom. Met a few people then, and then at the end of the chat, they were like, actually, like, a lot of your imagery is the same as Alex's, the director's imagery. I was like, oh, right, okay. But they were like, and I don't know if at that point they were like sent more scripts. They were like, and can you maybe do another set of boards, but just in response to what we've talked about? I think they just wanted to test the sort of creative dialogue, like if we could interpret each other, and I could demonstrate what I was talking about. But in those early chats, we discussed a lot of ideas of things which stayed throughout, actually. So that was quite nice. It was quite reassuring. Yeah. So lots of Zoom chats, lots of mood boards. I mean, I really wanted it. I had to work really hard. I had to really dig deep in myself to find imagery that articulated what I'd been saying. And I guess that sort of set the tone for the whole job, to be honest.
I think when you so the treatment / drip must have had such a, that's like a really big reaction if you're like tense, and it's like even your husband noticing what's going on, like how can you be so tense, and it's like we just read something that's giving you that reaction.
Yeah.
It says a lot, really.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's like how even if when you're reading something for the first time, it's making you feel like that. There must be times where your mind sort of goes like, how can I then present that in my design as well, and how it can, where do I start trying to communicate my ideas, especially when you say about your mood boards and images were similar to Alex, the director of Block One, because she mentioned that as well when I was speaking to her. And I was just saying just how interesting how even though some people might not have met or have spoken once or twice, that your taste and thinking are so aligned. It's kind of slightly scary as well. Just because of well, it's just more like how you could think of similar ideas, but you've had one or two conversations, but you're already on the same wavelength as each other.
Just as well, I'd say. Just as well. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it was quite a process, and it brilliant, and we were given a lot of time just with each other to sort of go through a lot of imagery. She brought stuff, I brought stuff. We kind of sat, and we had they rented us like a hotel conference room. It was really weird, but it was just two of us there with all these boards laid out. And then there was another day we were just like going around coffee shops all day, just talking and looking at stuff and really analysing. She was really forensic about looking at the frame and the use of colour and proportions of colour, and I was saying what worked and what didn't work. And yeah, it was really drilled down into detail.
Us, like as humans, subconsciously, like color will always play a big part in our lives. And I could, because there's so much rage and different emotions in the show, like I can imagine that it was very easy to use stuff like reds a lot in your designing, and look and feel, but that's not the case on this. How did you go about choosing color palettes for the different time periods and locations? Because I got like a real visceral feeling when I saw in episode 1, like the school and the various like looks that you had in the school and the colors, because it reminded me of when I went to school, and that's like 20 years after the events of episode 1, and it's like how does a school still have those colors even in like the noughties, for example?
Oh, interesting you say about the red and the rage. I mean, I think for me, like I'm nothing like Niall, like I hope that, but for me it was always an emotional connection to Niall and telling Niall's story, and I'm the same age as Niall, so that was quite interesting to mind my own experience as well, but also interesting. You could just see, like in my head, it was like, oh God, I can know what the corridor is like. I know what this exam hall like, and it's not like an exact replica of my own experience, but it's almost dreamlike. And I think, looking at all this imagery together, and also Alex's perspective, she's not from Scotland, she's brought up in Germany, and so it's a different perspective on it, which is quite good actually, to see how an outsider see things too. And I think we sort of gravitated towards certain pictures and references, and we felt like we had a bunch of film and TV programs we didn't want it to look like. but we had some that we were interested in how they looked. We were conscious of, and this is nothing on what's it called, One Day, that came out. I know Patrick Rolfe, he's a fantastic man and a brilliant designer, but they'd gone for a very almost like timeless 80s, and it was very nice and warm and cozy feeling, and we didn't want that to feel quite so safe. This is totally deviating off the colour thing, but yeah. So I guess the palette distilled from the imagery that we were looking at, and we wanted it not to be a kind of gritty Scottish grey story. We did want to embrace the sort of fun of the 80s as well, but we had lots of chats about the feel of the different episodes, and Alex was keen that each episode would have its own palette, and that was kind of easier to do for block one because the world was quite small. Block episode 1, it's just his house and the school, really. Episode 2, it's just the university and the halls and the union. Episode 3, it starts to open out a bit, and so we kind of had talked about how that the colours would develop a bit through the first 3 episodes anyway. So we came up with this ice cream analogy. I don't know if did Alex tell you. So like episode 1 was Neapolitan ice cream with like pistachio, strawberry, chocolate, and then just more of the feeling. Episode 2 is mint chocolate chip, but actually it was kind of yellow and brown, so it's more banana really. And then episode 3, so kind of the episode 1 was kind of more greens, pastel pinks, and then episode 2 was more yellowy. But then episode 3 really opened out into lots of different spaces, and also then the Ruben became a real threat, and it was like the actual incidents of violence aren't that often, but he just, by him being there and knowing that he's in the story, you're kind of like, oh God, there's just a sense of foreboding the whole time. Anyway, so we came up with mint chocolate chip, not mint chocolate chip for that one, chalk ice, like it was fractured and hard and cold inside. It was just a way in, really. So that was kind of, so then by episode 3, it starts to take a darker turn, and we had had more night scenes, and then with the sort of countryside element as well, trying to make that not so cozy either. I've totally deviated off the palette, but again, that's how the palette formed anyway. It was kind of pastely, but we still wanted like poppy colors of the 80s, and we still wanted it to be quite joyful. So
So I don't mind the deviation part because it kind of plays a part in it, because it's also location work / like what you're going to be working with. I do have a question for that later on, but just going back to saying we're talking to Alex and having like an outsider's point of view to it. Again, it's like interesting because, as you said, like you probably have an idea in mind, and then they might have an idea as well. And instead of going for something similar, like in One Day, with like kind of having a more of like a whimsical look, you can kind of change it up. But then also you don't want to just go for like a grey, rainy sort of look of Scotland, and I don't know, maybe it's like more stereotypical looking of it and sort of play around more. And I like the sort of idea of like the ice cream palettes and ideas with that, because then it's such a easy way for me to picture these colors now. When you go for like a pistachio, I'm just thinking of like an ice cream shop now with all the I don't want to say boxes, but containers of ice cream. And now I'm thinking, oh yeah, that pistachio green, oh yeah, that would have been for that room. But then also, as you're saying, like the involvement of the colors and looks once the world is expanding, I feel like as well with that you can play around with so much. But when you're saying that you're just tweaking the color a bit more to go from pistachio to like a mint chocolate color, where you have that green still, but then the blotches of of brown or black in there, and then you kind of play around with like opening the mind of the characters as well, so that they're with the colors, and then sort of playing around with it a bit more. And then also, as you're saying, like the threat of Ruben as well. As you said, it's not that he has, it's the ticking time bomb aspect of it all, and how you can use the space of where you're shooting some of these scenes. I think, as you're mentioning in episode 3, when they're going to they're out there in the fields and in forests, you're in an open area, there's like nowhere to escape. But then also you can use that sort of luscious nature of it to sort of show like somebody's nature, like the subtext of that. And then also, you know, in episode 2 with the attack inside the kitchen area, you're in a contained area, and I really like the little touches of just like also like the seating in chairs. Like I can really feel like those chairs, like they're not like, I don't want, they're the sort of bigger like soft back chairs. I don't know what they're actually called, so forgive me. They're but like the ones where they sit by the table with like pre-drinks, those sort of things. I just love the look of that. And then also the glass in the kitchen, towards the like opposite the cooker and cabinets. I always feel like that's a very 80s feel, like 80s 90s sort of look, with that installation as well. Now I'm deviating with sort of waxing lyrical over your work.
Well, for me, it's 70. Like I think a lot of it, because the design, you know, it's not just about the color; it's about the textures as well. And for me, from my own lived experience, it's like 70s stuff that was still hanging about in the 80s. You know, and the student halls would be a little bit dated as well, so we had nods to that. And I suppose, like, for myself, just for my own sort of development, I was really interested in playing around with pattern and texture, you know, and this was a great excuse to do that. I think for Alex and I, you know, we talked about the feelings in the spaces, and how we wanted the textures to convey an emotion. And so, for instance, like when we start off in the house, you know, there's lots of like soft material. You know, we've got a nice cloth, tablecloth, and, you know, lots of curtains, shaggy carpet, patterned wallpapers. I mean, it's all quite claustrophobic and a little bit clashing, but it's a bit of a warm space that kind of gets a bit invaded by this cuckoo. But then the school is a little bit harder in terms of surfaces, and then we kind of developed that more for episode 2. It was like, well, I really wanted this prison feel to it, and sort of, I mean, the writing does so much already, but to make Ruben feel really at sea. So we had lots of, like, as you picked up on, glass and like shiny slippy vinyl and metal and linoleum and really hard, like, laminate, you know, for the kitchen cabinets and all these things. You know, it's really, the breeze block walls, it's all really uncomfortable. There's nothing warm or comforting about the space at all. It's a bit relentless, really. And then then we're like, I think when we spent our time sort of developing the look of it, we got to episode 3, we're like, oh God, what are we going to do with this? Like, because they're all over the place. And so we kind of felt like, although it was a community centre, for instance, that it was still in a really brutalist building, there would still be senses of that sort of hard architecture or sense of threat around the place. So even when they go to the countryside, we still wanted a bit of a shit countryside. So when the car breaks down, like, you know, they're in a field, but there are all these high rises in the background. And when they go to the outdoor centre, it's this kind of really, I mean, it's kind of stylish now, but this sort of 70s, 80s sort of wedge of a box that's in the landscape, and that's where they go, you know, they start and finish the journey at this box in the landscape. So it's not all bucolic. There's still like sort of man's imposition on the landscape around as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned about the prison thing, because it's I feel like Niall's in the prison as well, in his bedroom.
Mm.
Actually feels like a cell in a way. And just the way that everything's sort of positioned, it does feel like a prison cell with his bed and everything pointing towards the windows, and it just feels very tight and small. Yes, it's a great sort of image when he sort of wakes up after the night out in episode 2.
Yeah, when we're in the screening, it came on screen. I was like, yes. So I was so happy to see that shot. It was great.
And it's like there's also like the symmetry of it all. I think it's quite, again, that's probably it's you and camera work as well, but like the symmetry of how everything's lined up.
It distorted the room because it was, we didn't, to give the illusion that it was small, but actually it was really long and thin. So you could get quite far back from him, but he'd be down at the end of the room. So the walls would still be coming in, but you're still quite far away. Yeah, it's a bit of a distorted space, but I was really pleased with how it worked out.
Yeah, and as I said, it looks cool, and yeah, you just get a very like sense of idea of like, even though it's somebody's living space, they're a foreigner to it in a way, and they haven't done enough to what's the word, make it their own and really sort of accept where they are. But such is the character that's being portrayed. There's something I'm curious to know about as well, and that's, we're talking about the location side of things with the recce's, and not recce's, sorry, but like being in the fields and forests, but then also the Bruce's architecture and nature. Do location recce's make you rethink the ideas or how the space will be used when you've read the scripts and you've started designing and thinking about certain ideas?
That's a massive question. I mean, I guess when you're scouting, you're thinking about what needs to take place in that space and how you want it to look, because they're kind of going hand in hand, the stage directions and the aesthetic. I guess. I mean, I don't know. Like, we could start with like the house, Laurie's house. We went on quite a journey there. Like, for the exterior, it was written on the page as Largs, and Alex and I went down to Largs for the day, and it's a famous seaside town, and drove past all the seals and had an ice cream and really had a real walk around to get a sense of the place and what visually made the place. And I, when it's talked to anybody Scottish, we're like, well, it's ice cream and chips and the ferry over to Millport. But actually, where Niall lived, the sort of social housing was further at the back end of the town, away from the sea. But what we liked about it is it was right up against a really steep hillside. So you were really, you had these kind of sort of 1970s flats right against a hill. And so that took us on our journey, and also because we looked at various estates around Glasgow and the traditional sort of terraces of grey pile buildings. We didn't want that, we wanted an estate that would give us an excuse to have a bit of colour, but not like silly colour, not like kids show colour, but just still, paint some of the timber green. So there was an area that I knew from my childhood in Cumbernauld that gave us that style of housing. But we would have hills in the background as well, so still very rural feeling, having the two side by side. So that's where we started with the exterior, really, and then we tried to find the interior of Laurie's house. So then, the poor location managers were like dropping letters, and please, if you ever get a letter through your door from a location manager, to phone up. Yes, we're so reliant on really good locations, and I think we've gotten one house, and it was before the DOP had started, and it was just, it was a nice family home, but it was just not practicable to film it at all. And then we started on the idea that, well, we would just have that entire house somewhere else, whether we build it or find another found space that could be Laurie's house for the interior, and we just established the exterior. And Abron Hill, but then the letter job, some women came back to us, so we went for a look, and they kind of, with Alex and Carlos, they really wanted the connection between walking up the street, going into the door, and being in the kitchen, and but then the nature of the script for the bedroom, it still didn't really warrant being on a location. Anyway, this lovely woman answered a letter, another woman, and yeah, she's up for us filming there. And but it was all like double glazed windows and fully fitted kitchen with this massive island. It's quite a small room anyway. I was like, right, okay, we can go for location, but I have to be able to rip out our kitchen, entirely redecorate your house, change all the doors, do all this stuff, right? I need to be able to do this stuff. You know, I don't want to just walk in and we just got to compromise on how it's going to look. And anyway, she said yes. I don't know. So we did. We took our kitchen, we put our own kitchen, and then actually, once it all got stripped out, the space became much bigger. You know, I constructed the space so to facilitate filming as much as we could. But then we'd cut on the stairs, and then we built the bedroom and the bathroom and the upstairs landing and the stairwell on a sound stage.
Again, it's amazing how much like people you need to do, like, to, if you're on location, to service what's it called, get it ready to shoot on. The fact that like that person was like, yeah, you could just rip up my kitchen, not a problem. Which is pretty wild if you think about it. But at the same time, I guess needs a must in a way, with ideas and how you want to sort of do it. But I guess as well, you could, even though if you're designing, there's only so much you can kind of think of without actually getting your feet on the ground to see whereabouts you might be filming, or what might pop up, or what might trigger something later on that you can make a note of, or like photos that you're taking of locations, to think like, oh, that would be a cool thing to sort of add in, especially if you're working between location and stage. It's like, how much of a location, how much of where we're shooting on location do we need to transfer back onto the stage, and the way that the layout is going to happen as well. Because if they turn right into a room, they're expecting the living room, for example, but if they turn left, we might not have the space on the stage, so we have to sort of rejig it around, things like that as well.
I don't know, I'm trying to think about all the location stuff that we went through. It was quite a process. Like, for instance, we did look at various university exteriors. We went to Halls of Residence, and we just knew as soon as we went to the Halls of Residence, it just was practical to shoot it in there. It was just really feel for the students, but like the communal living space was just tiny. So I think from that kind of evolved, that we would maybe build. Yeah, that's what it started. We were going to build on a location, and I took Alex to a big space that I'd shot in before, and I thought that could really work, and it had quite high sort of clear story windows, just for that prisony feel. But she had seen one of the references. She went, oh, I'd really like to still see the world outside, the oppressive world outside. So we ended up in this place in Cadogan Square that had, you know, it was like classic Scottish brutalist architecture outside, but then inside was just a complete black hole. There was just nothing in there. But you know, it was all the floor space working around the pillars to make the space that we wanted. So we went through a few layouts of how the rooms would relate to the communal area. I guess I was at the start hoping, just for economy really, that the bedrooms would be off the communal area. But then I think Alex showed the plan to Richard, and he was really keen for there to be a corridor, to be a separation, you know, so for that scene where Rubens with, I forgot her name.
Is it Celeste?
Celeste that sort of drama unfolded. So we ended up building a corridor that wrapped around the outside of the main living area as well.
Yeah, again, it's amazing to hear these sort of like ideas and how like small little tweaks that you want to sort of present certain story elements like the corridor, and thinking that like it will come out to there, but then also how using certain spaces you still want to present like the brutalist world out there and whatnot. Yeah, I guess like that's just the beauty of production design and the world that you're creating and how you want to present it as well, and then also how it's going to service the story. Yeah, it's fascinating, really, and just the use of space as well, because you turn up to locations and then you have your set deck teams and props coming in to dress the sets and locations. That must be pretty cool to know that you see it like one day it's just a normal place, to then everybody's come in, done all the hard work, and it's like, yeah, we're ready to shoot. There must be a slight tinge of excitement to have the crew roll in to be able to work in that area as well.
Well, yeah. Although sometimes they just walk in and they're just like, oh yeah, they don't even know that you've done anything. Well, maybe that's good. The halls, as soon as you stepped through a door, you were in some like shitty open space again. So they knew that was a construct, for sure. Yeah, and we were under a lot of pressure with that set. There was some issues with signing off the access to the location, and our access was pushed by a week. So we had everyone working on top of each other to pull the set together, yeah, to not mess up the schedule too much, which was quite a challenge.
Yeah, I guess that's another thing as well that you have to worry about, is access to locations and the schedule, because again, time is money in film and TV, and yeah, if you're behind by one day, it's not great, is it? There's something else I want to sort of speak about, because you're jumping through time periods and kind of maybe setting up the story a little bit, but then it's a continuation throughout time. Do you ever feel like you might need to place any Easter eggs in the scenes that are set in the past and present, just so it can like remind the audience of things that might have happened earlier in the show?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big Easter egg person, and then I felt like a failure that I've not really done that. We had,
Sorry.
I mean, it's like in a bigger picture, like the small scale, we had Niall's lamp, which was this little yellow lamp, which actually belonged to Paddy, the buyer, and it ended up in his bedroom, and then we took it to the halls, and then it's in his student flat in episode 3. I'm not quite sure if it continued its journey into block 2, but that, that stayed kind of, that's the thing that travelled with Niall. So poor Paddy, like every couple of weeks, we're like, oh, can we get your lamp again? And then I think at one point Carlos stole it, and they were like, no, man, you can't steal Paddy's lamp, you've got to hand it back. Held to ransom. In terms of like, we had echoes of sort of visual look. So for block 2, when we went into that, we had constructed an idea that there was like Niall's past life. So the architecture of Niall's past life would reflect the sort of brutalist, sort of dated 1970s feel. So even like Ruben's house is, because he's part of his old life, that's quite kind of a 70s house. And we had Mora's house. I can't remember if it made the cut or not, and Mora's church, and we obviously go back to Laudie's house as well. So we had kind of nods to the old architecture of his old life within block 2. It's not really an Easter egg as such, I suppose.
Oh, I feel bad now asking that question, because
No,
how you
on it. Dog's gonna have Easter eggs all over the place.
I guess as well, like you might have done that subconsciously as well, because if you start thinking about Easter eggs in like your designing, then you might take away from what you want to do and what you want to say. Or there's like even little home comforts like the lamp. Yeah, Frankie must have made a killing on that rental of the lamp, but But
Yeah, no, I don't think he got anything actually.
uh,
He got love.
probably more stress the fact that somebody had stolen it. But even so, like, I think there's just probably little hints and reminders that you can pop into it and really show just like their lives and what certain little things mean. It's the same with like posters that people put up on the wall. But then the stuff like that will change because your taste changes over time, especially like music or films. I think you have that little setup of like the ET and between episode 2 and 3, which is a nice little touch as well. Yeah, and I think people will notice things anyway because, as I said, subconsciously you probably put it in there. But yeah, it's I do like the idea of the lab though thing because it's simple but it's effective to show someone's life. There's also something that I'm really curious to know about, and maybe this is more just because it's about the whole wedding scene and the design of it, because weddings like are quite traditional when people come from different cultures and backgrounds. There's certain things that you do or might have as a design. When you're designing the whole wedding setup, were there any sort of Scottish traditions that you wanted to pepper in or instill just so that people can, so it has that tradition still in it, or was it a case of not really thinking about that and just thinking about a wedding setting instead?
Oh gosh, the wedding was like a whole other film in itself. It was a lot went into that. We didn't have a piper, which was a bit of a shame, and we pulled together lots of references. I suppose because almost the setting of it was quite Scottish. For the exterior, you know, we found a lovely mill. One of the location managers found this lovely mill, really lovely location as well, and because we've been to a lot of sort of really slick wedding venues, and Alex just really wasn't feeling it. You know, she just felt it was too constructed, and she didn't want anything that was too Instagrammy, which is quite difficult to do nowadays because anytime you type in wedding, it's just full of Instagram stuff. She wanted some authenticity to it, and though this is a proper wedding venue, they were just really lovely. You know, they're family homes in the middle of the site, and it's set. You know, it's got a little river running through it, and it's set in the countryside. There's sheep all around, and because Alex had the ceilidh, you know, the sort of nod to the Scottish culture, she was really keen for that. And we had a little ceilidh band on a stage. The set deck team in the wedding meal, they had little miniature bottles of whiskey. It was a little favour. That was a sort of nod to the Scottish stuff. But it was quite sort of trying to find our line was difficult because it was a sort of multicultural wedding as well. But we did have, well, they didn't see them. They were like pakora and the buffet up the back and little nods like that.
Yeah, because I'm always curious to know if like what different weddings are like compared to like an English wedding, or like you have the Scottish wedding where they'll have the kilts or the ceilidh as well, or like you'd go to like in a Polish wedding, how they would have like bottle, you know, little bottles of vodka. That's usually, what is it, like moonshine, because somebody would make it in their bathtub. It's like stuff like that. So I'm always curious to see how like traditions and whatnot incorporated, especially in TV shows, because sometimes it could be like the first, what's the word, the first impression that somebody has of like those sort of weddings, even though it's based on like a TV show.
We had little bits of tartan, like a bit quiet tartan scattered about because Carol, the costume designer, had this beautiful kilt made for Niall as an adult, for Jamie Bell, which was gorgeous tartan. So we kind of picked up on that as well and had little bits of that around the place on top of the barrels or tied around flowers and things, just quietly there.
Yeah, and even that's quite nice as well, like having those, you know, little bits thrown into it. I've got 3 more questions left. For my third and final question, what was your favorite set to design?
Oh God, That's like asking who's your favourite child. I mean, I did really like doing the halls because it was so big, and it was just an entirely blank piece of paper to start from, to sort of create that from nothing. But I mean, weirdly, Claire, who's the second block's set decorator, and I really loved the interview room. It's later in block 1, the police interview room. It was just a shitty room down the end of some council offices, but we found this really lovely fabric that I thought was a wall covering, but it turned out it wasn't. So the poor painters had a bit of a job putting it on, but it was really lovely. It's just really simple, just this sort of tweedy fabric and just a table, a really small room, but we just loved it. It just looked great, even though there was nothing to it really. It was funny.
Do you find there's like those sort of moments where it's like quite simple, like you have the idea and you're like, this is exactly what we need. You just need a small tweak on it though. I guess those are sort of ideas as well, like great, because then you can just, I don't need to spend too much time on it. But yeah, poor painter needs to make sure that it can look good or not, and be ready. For my penultimate question, I know we spoke about the colors and how like anger and rage plays a part in the show, but I also feel like the show deals with identity. How do you go about presenting your identity and designs in past, present, and future projects?
Gosh, I don't know. My own identity. I mean,
yeah, I think there's always like you can add a sprinkle of yourself into it all.
I don't know. I suppose like you're always going to make choices based on your own personal aesthetic and your own taste. But I think that's part of the art, is to put that aside and really question why you are choosing something. Like, is it just because you like it, and is it really the right solution? So it's almost like challenging your own identity to not have it on screen. Obviously, you're going to be drawn to certain colours and patterns and ways of things, quite like sort of graphic shapes and a sharp contrast to large areas, and sort of challenging your own identity to make sure what you're bringing over is what's right for the script really, and for the character.
And I think as well, as you said, like it's probably quite easy to lean into your tastes and kind of get lost in designing by using your taste rather than actually, is this what's needed for the show, and whatnot. But then also it's such a good foundations for what you want to do, because then you can see what's going to look good and what's not going to look good with it all.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's an absolute treat when you get a character like, yes, this is right up my street and I can just choose all the things I like. And like Ava's house, I mean, we really loved doing that. It was great fun. We got lots of nice things and it looked really lovely, and we'd quite happily live there. Laurie's house, I mean, that's nothing like my own personality, and I really would like to live there. That's just a cacophony in there. Yeah, so I mean, if there is an opportunity to have something like that, it's great fun.
And I feel like as well, like if you see something that you really like, you could probably, buy 2 of them. So then you'd be like, oh, this will look good in my house as well. Because you know that you could be like enamored with like a design or an idea of things.
Oh no, I try not to get stuff for the house.
I think, if you do that for every project, you'll be starting to look like a rental house. But yeah, and just for my final question, is there anything you want to ask me, or is there anything that I might have missed in my questions that you would like to add?
Oh gosh, I don't know really. I think we've kind of touched on it. It was just like we had such a long time to sit with these characters, Alex and I, and to on the sort of episode 1 to 3, and really form the look of it and the emotions. We kind of put together this little manifesto of films that we wanted people in the department to watch, and photographers to have a look at, and I put together a little Excel spreadsheet of all these different photographers and links to their websites or reference pages and reference books, and that was really useful to people to immerse themselves in it. And again, our art department assistant at Villa put together these great posters for each time period, with sort of significant cultural events and political events, but also what were the big TV shows and what were the big films and what was the music, real contextual studies that might inform everything else. Like we talked about Laurie's house and the age that she was, and your kind of taste is formed at a particular age, and so she's a bit stuck in time with that. But then the aspirations of, like, if Dynasty was on the TV at the time, we joked about that might be an aspirational thing. Sort of, it doesn't look like it at all, but slight nods to that, like the chairs in her kitchen. There was a brilliant pattern on the chairs, and it was really pastel-y and 80s with Dynasty chairs. Only we would know.
I guess as well, like, you could lean on people's, like, how, like, the popularity of, like, shows then as well, with how they want to make their house look like, similar to, as you said, like Cheers or Dynasty. I guess Cheers is slightly different because it's based in a bar, but
Yeah.
but like the color wise and how it's like, it's quite warm, and having that, maybe trying to transfer that warmth into how your house looks.
Well, we talked, like in the 80s, well, certainly from me growing up in Scotland, to sort of Americana was a huge influence, and real escapism. It was like Back to the Future, it was a bit earlier than when we start our story in 1987, but that was a massive influence, and Bruce Springsteen and Bon Jovi and 501s, and there was all these posters of James Dean and Marilyn Monroe and all these sort of 50s icons as well from America, loom large. And I think, and also we were under a constant state of threat of nuclear war. That was a huge thing, sort of anti-Russian rhetoric as well. And at that time, it was a real weight on teenagers of that time.
I feel like I would never understand, like, wouldn't know the feel of, like, living under that sort of nuclear attack, but it must feel so odd knowing that, like, you go to school one day and the next day something could happen. Of course, nothing did happen, but, well, I don't know, Chernobyl, for example, but it's still, crazy to have that sort of threat looming over you, or you just don't realize it at the same time.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing what you live with.
Yeah. Emer, thank you for your time for today.
Thanks for chatting. It's great.
No, thank you. It's all you. And Half Man is streaming now on BBC iPlayer and HBO. Go out and watch, observe, and adore Emer and her team's lovely work. Thank you very much. You take care, and bye-bye now. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.